wanted to take a moment to show you something I've been playing around with here. It's a simple prediction trick. It involves a deck of cards. We won't need the jokers. This could be a borrowed deck. It could be a deck that you're working with in the moment, a fully shuffled deck that's in use. The important factor, though, is that you want to make sure that the deck, again, it is completely normal, everything's different, the deck is completely unprepared, and to verify that, you would have someone shuffle. Have someone shuffle the deck. They can shuffle it any way they want, as many times as they want. You just want to make sure that everything is shuffled up very, very cleanly, so that you can guarantee that what you're about to do is amazing. So what we're going to do is pretty simple. We're going to make 3 predictions. We're going to have 3 people cut the deck, a couple of spectators and myself, and I'm going to make some predictions on what we cut to and see how it comes out here in the end. So what we'll do first is, again, make sure that deck is completely shuffled. And we'll have somebody go ahead and cut into the deck. But before we do that, we want to make a quick prediction. So I'm going to write down what I think we're going to cut to. So I'll write my prediction here on one of these little note index cards. And once I have my prediction, I'll set it aside right over here. And then you have a spectator cut anywhere that they want to. They can cut anywhere at all. So let's say that they cut right to here, and that card would be the 2 of spades. So very interesting. I'm feeling pretty good about this. Okay, so that's what they cut to. We'll set that aside and hang on to it. And we're going to try this again. So again, we want to make sure that the deck is completely shuffled, that everything has been thoroughly and properly mixed up. And we'll have somebody else cut, but before we do that, we'll write down a quick prediction. I think we're going to come out around here. I don't know. I'm not quite as confident on that one. We'll see what happens. So 2 predictions, and we'll have another spectator cut. Let's say they cut right around here. And yeah, 3 of hearts. 3 of hearts. Okay. All right. Now we got to do this one more time. Okay, so we had 1 spectator cut, another spectator cut. I'll do the last one here. So again, I just want to make sure that the deck is completely shuffled. And I think that's mixed up enough. And let's see here. All right. I think I'm gonna do it. I think I got it. Okay. Let's see if I can manage to hit it. So I'm going to cut right there. It's a iconic card right there in Magic. Yeah, let's check this out. So just to recap, we've got 3 cards. We've got three of these predictions, 1, 2, 3, 1 for each of them. Let's see how this comes out. Okay, so the first prediction we had here was this one right here. 2 of spades. You can see that right there. 2S. The second prediction over here that we had was the 3 of hearts, 3H. And the third prediction that we have over here is the Ace of spades, 3 for 3. So we hit them all. Again, this is from it's an entirely impromptu trick with a shuffled deck, a borrowed deck, and the spectator can shuffle before you start. And the spectators are choosing these selections. So stick around and we'll take a look and see how this can work. Okay, so this is the explanation for this little prediction feat that we had. There's a couple of components to this. One of them may be very obvious to you if you do mentalism magic. You're going to recognize one of the mechanisms at work here probably right away, that all tricks that involve multiple predictions, not all of them, but many of them, that involve multiple predictions will use a specific principle that we'll talk about in a minute. But before I do that, I need to show you the other component to this trick that makes it work. Again, it's a regular deck, can be a borrowed deck, fully shuffled deck in use. You want to have it shuffled before you use it. I just want to demonstrate to you one very, very quick little feat here that kind of makes this whole thing work. And it's this one here. We'll take the deck and shuffle it and cut it all up. And I'm going to cut to the Queen of Hearts. I'm going to cut right to the Queen of Hearts here. So when I cut into the deck, you can see where I end up at is in fact the Queen of Hearts. Now I can do this to any card, or I wouldn't say any card. I can do this to different cards over and over again. It's not something you would want to do because, again, repeating something over and over again can be very easily detected in terms of the method. But there are ways to kind of force yourself into a card that you know that you're going to select. That you can set the deck on the fly in such a way that you can have a specific card selected by yourself at will. That can be, in some cases, it can be a card, it's always the same card, or it could be a different card at different times and you're just able to call it out. So that's the other part of this trick. So there's a mentalism aspect to it, a principle called the one-ahead principle, which we'll talk about. And then the other part of this is the fact that you actually need to be able to cut to yourself on your choice. You need to be able to cut to a card that you know that you're going to hit. So if you can do these two things, then you can do this trick. So first of all, the one-ahead principle, let me take care of that first. The one-ahead principle is very simple. The one-ahead principle relies on free selections being made by audience members. However, one of those selections is either a force or it is made by the performer in such a way that it has a predetermined outcome. So the one selection is forced in some respect. It has already been predetermined what it's going to be. So in general, the way this can work, let's say that I know that the card that I'm going to force on my cut is going to be the Ace of Spades. And I'll set that, the Eight of Spades. I'll set that aside over there. That's the one I would be cutting to. Now, up to that point, there's going to be two really free selections. Now, this is how it's going to work. I'll use the back of these note cards. So what I would do is I would have somebody cut into the deck and select a card. And when they cut into the deck, they truly are freely selecting a card. And what I would do is when I am predicting what this card is going to be, on my first billet, that's what we call that in mentalism, my first little note card here, instead of writing down what I actually think they're going to pick, I'm going to write what I know that I'm going to pick at the end. So on my first prediction, I'm actually going to write down the Eight of Spades. Okay, and then I would turn that over so that no one can see it, and I would set it aside. And they would select their card, and their card it would be the Five of Diamonds. That's a real free selection. Okay, there's no hanky-panky going on there. They really did select that on their own freely. Okay, and I wrote down this, presumably for that selection. Then we would repeat the exact same procedure. The cards would be shuffled and cut, yada yada, and they would then select another one. So before they do that, I'm going to write down my prediction of what I think they're going to cut to. But instead of writing down what I actually think they're going to pick, I'm going to write what was picked the last time, which is the Five of Diamonds. So I would write down 5D, and that would be my prediction, presumably for this card, but it's actually prediction for the last card. Okay. Now, what would happen is they would freely select, they would cut, and they would select this card, which is the Queen of Hearts. That's a free selection. That is not predetermined and that is not forced. Okay, so now we're on to the last selection. Now the last selection is going to be the 8 of spades. I'm going to talk about how we do that in a minute. There's actually a few ways we can do it, but we know it's going to be this card. So what I'm going to do is when I write down my prediction for this card that I know that I'm going to cut to, I'm going to actually write down the last card that was selected. I've already written down the 8 of spades. I wrote it down way back here at the beginning. Okay, and now that this information has been divulged to me, the Queen of Hearts, I'm going to write this down, Q, H, Queen of Hearts, as if I am identifying this selection to come when I'm actually writing down the last one. So I'm good. I actually have every single prediction necessary to pull this off here at this point. Now what I need to do is I need to have a method that's going to allow me to cut to the 8 of spades, which is my own force card. That last cut again is done by the performer. Okay, so let's talk about some methodologies for cutting to cards. We've already talked a lot about this on this channel. I've shown you a few different ways to do it. Any one of those ways will work, but this is how I have done it. This is how I presented it to you. What I do is I get the deck back from the spectator after it's been shuffled. And this is probably the safest way to do it, but it also carries some risk. If I used a card, let's say it was my deck, and I had a crimped card that I knew I could always cut to myself, and I was able to get the deck back from them, first of all I have to hope that their shuffling didn't work the crimp out enough that I wouldn't be able to use it. Okay, and let's assume that is not the case, that my crimped card is still viable. When I get the deck back, I could cut it to my crimped card, and then I can do a shuffle with my crimped card on top. And as long as I maintain it on top or on the bottom or wherever the case may be, outside of the middle, the spectator should be able to cut to that card. Okay, to some other card rather than the card that I want them to. Okay, now that is one very risky way to do it. This is the better way to do it, which also has some risks, but it's less risk than that. We're going to use a real shuffled deck that doesn't have any crimps in it. We are going to use a crimp, but we're going to lay the crimp in right at the moment that we need it. Now the way this is going to work is I'm going to get the shuffled deck, and at this point I don't know what my force card is going to be. I'm going to determine that when I shuffle the deck for the first time. So when I get the deck, I'm going to do my first shuffle. I'm going to cut off from the top to the right, half the deck. And on the left-hand side, this card down here, this is going to end up being my force card, whatever it is. In this case, it is the Queen of Spades. What I'm going to do is I'm going to riffle shuffle, and I'm going to peek the top card last as I riffle, and I can see right here that it is the Queen of Spades. Now it's on top of the deck, so I'm going to square up the deck, and now I'm good to go as long as I keep the Queen of Spades on top of the deck throughout the rest of the trick until I need it. Okay, so I've glimpsed the Queen of Spades. That's going to be the first prediction that I write down over here. Okay, that's my force. So it's on the top. I might shuffle again. As long as I maintain that card on the top, I'm okay. I can even do some cuts. I need to do some false cuts though, and false cuts are going to be very important later on when I force this cut here in a little bit when it's my turn. An easy one is from Erdnase, where you do just a triple false cut. You bring 1/3 of the pack on top and you hold a thumb break. You bring another third of the pack on top and hold that thumb break, and bring another third back to the top. You've actually retained the entire order of the deck, but you've retained that Queen of Spades on top. Another more flashy way to do it, I think I did it in the video, and if you slow it down or you pay close attention, you'll see what's going on. But I did the same kind of idea. I did a triple cut where I did one cut to the top, holding the break, another third to the top, and the last one I do a false strip where I'm actually taking cards off the bottom and then putting the top back on top. And that actually retains the entire order of the deck as well. Not that I need to, but I do need to retain that top card. So at this point, I can write down my prediction, which is going to be Queen of Spades. Then the first spectator will cut. They will select the 9 of Hearts. Okay, and then I will replace the cut because I need to keep my Queen of Spades on top. Now I've already written down Queen of Spades. That was my first prediction. Okay, and then we'll repeat the same process. I'm going to cut the top off to the right, and I'm going to make sure that as I riffle, I keep that queen of spades on top. And then I bring it together. Now, one thing that you want to do is when you're squaring up the deck, retaining that card on top, you want to do at least once or twice the squaring motion like this, where you're covering it, because this is the method by which we're going to lay a crimp later on. Okay, so you want to kind of emulate the motions that you need in order to pull it off later on. Okay, so I've done that. I could do cuts if I want to. Nonetheless, I'm going to have someone cut into the deck. Now I'm going to write down my prediction. My prediction is actually going to be 9 of hearts, because I'm one ahead of everybody. I've already written down my queen of spades. Okay, that was my first prediction. This one here, when I'm writing my prediction for the second card, I'm going to write 9 of hearts. That'll be my second prediction. They will cut, and they will cut to the 7 of diamonds. Okay, and that'll be the last one that I write down. And then I get into the last part of it where I need to force. Now this is where the dirty work happens. I need to force my top card by means of a dead cut. So the way I do this is I do a riffle shuffle where I keep my force card on top. And in the motion, at least in the last riffle that I do, in the motion of squaring, as I get everything together, I'm going to bridge the top of the deck. And if you look at it from the side, it looks like that. And I'm going to do it with both hands. So you notice that the bottom cards are still flat. They are not bent. But the top cards are bridged in this upward motion, the uppermost cards. So as I gather together, I bridge them in the squaring motion. Now they can't perceive that that's what has happened because they can't see it. My hands are covering for just that brief moment when I do it. Now you don't want to put a lot of force into it so it looks like, really awkward, like you're doing something special or different. It's just a very quick motion where you bridge up the top. And then what I want to do is I want to follow that up with a couple of options. One option is to just do some cuts, small packet cuts, until I get my bridged card into the middle of the deck. Now it's important that what I'm doing is I'm cutting the bottom card, the bottom group of cards on top of that bridged card, because these cards are absolutely flat and this one is bridged upward. Okay, so I need to get the bottommost cards on the topmost cards one way or the other. So I can do that either with a couple of cuts to get it into the bottom. That's probably the easiest way to go. And then at this point I can dead cut into that. I'll show you that in a second. The other way to do it, the way that I did it, again, my force card is on top and I've laid in my crimp. The other way to do it is to cut off half of the deck from the bottom and then do a false strip. So I'm retaining the bottom cards, again, on top of my force card. So a false strip on top of that. Another way to do this that covers things up a little bit, let me work my crimp out, is to, again, my force card is on top. Another way to do this is to, right after the riffle, do a cut, another cut, holding the break, and then do a false strip on top of that. And what I've done is I've made things messy and I've brought my force card right back to the top. And this gives you a reason to gather the cards together, okay? So you can do a little bit more of a complicated routine. It'll help maybe people lose where things are at here. But I've got this really messy grouping, and now I've got a reason to square the deck up and really just lay in that crimp on the top. And then I can follow that up with a couple of cuts or a false strip to get that down into the middle. Now at this point I have a crimp that looks like this. The card I'm cutting to is bowed kind of in an upward shape, and then the cards right above it are flat, and it gives me a little bit of a breather, a bit of a space there where there's air in between. And now this will automatically want to cut to that. Now all you have to know is approximately where it's at. I know that it's in the middle because that's where I cut it to. So I've made my last prediction, which is actually going to be the 7 of diamonds. I put that over there, and then I do my cut. and when I go to cut, very, very light touch, I cut approximately to where I know that crimp is going to be, and it will lift right off, very, very simply. Another little trick I've learned in using this kind of crimp is that you can press downward with the index finger a little bit on the front edge of the deck, on the very edge, when you go to lift up with your thumb on the back. And that will usually have a tendency to rock the flat half of the deck forward a bit and really open up that break so you can much more easily grab it. And then of course I've cut to my crimp card, my force card, which is the Queen of Spades, and then all I need to do is do the reveal at the end. Now, one quick thing about this is that they are out of order and you don't want people to notice that. So all you need to do to make things right is to take the first billet and put it on the bottom. So when I pick it up, when I pick up the stack, I might take that first one and peel it off and point out here and say I've made a prediction, one for each of these three, and then I'll set it back on in the place that I want it to be. Okay, so use the one you're moving to gesture and then put it in the right portion in the stack. And then at this point I can show my predictions, 9 of hearts, 7 of diamonds, Queen of Spades, and I've hit them all. So a couple other things on this. This is just a really, really good force to use when you're doing any kind of one-ahead mentalism, because dead cutting a card just looks so foolproof. There's no way, in the mind of an audience member that you could cut to a specific card. That has to be random. In fact, we know better that there's lots of ways to do it. This is just one of them. So that's my idea, using an impromptu crimp. And this crimp, by the way, will come out very quickly. This kind of crimp will come out the next time that you do a riffle shuffle. That crimp will be gone. It's not something that stays in there very long. Which also brings up another point, that when you lay in your crimp, you want to cut to it in short order. You don't want to wait too long to cut to that card, because it will kind of ease out fairly quickly compared to some other crimps. But I find it to be very reliable as long as you're pretty aggressive whenever you lay that in on those top cards. You really want to bend the top few cards up quite drastically to get that to stick. And then you should be good to go. So anyway, that's my idea. So a triple prediction from dead cut cards that you do with spectators. So you can do this as many times as you want. We did 3. You can do more than that if you want. You really want to draw out the drama. The only thing that matters is that you know the last one, and you start your predictions with the last one as you write them down, and then stay one ahead. So there you go. Triple prediction using a crimp and a dead cut. Have fun with that, and I wish all of you happy magicking.